And what I'll do before we also have live transcription that will be enabled. So that's enabled now if you'd wish to use it. So to start off, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Bunwarran and Wurundjeri people and offer our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are participating in this webinar. We recognise and respect the cultural heritage and connection to the lands and waters of Victoria. So the Sport4ALL program has been piloted in the City of Stonington, and it's been great to see the number of clubs that have joined us on this journey and started the inclusion scoreboard. And I think tonight is a great opportunity to talk to some coaches within community sport and high performance sport and talk about what they've done to adopt the environment and ways to support people with disability within their clubs and associations. So I'd like to start by introducing the panel tonight, and we have Chris, Naomi and Kaitlyn joining us, all from different backgrounds with various experience. I might pass it to Chris if you'd like to give us a short introduction and a bit about what you've done in the past, and yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Chris McKnight. Since 2011, I was looking after the able-bodied alpine skiing program, men's and women's, up to Sochi. After Sochi, I had the opportunity to make the transition to para-sport and para-alpine skiing. And I looked after a development team and worked my way into with athletes to men's coach and team manager up to the PyeongChang 2018 Paralympic Games.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Naomi, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My background is in netball. I started coaching the mainstream competition for quite a number of years in 2010. And then in 2018, started up a All-Abilities netball program at my local netball club. And then in 2019, I was given the position of the head coach of the Victorian team for women with intellectual disabilities through Netball Victoria.
Amazing. Thanks, Naomi. And Kaitlyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm kind of coming at it from two different angles. I've been a local gymnastics coach, teaching just at club level, mainly mainstream recreational gymnastics. But I'm also a para-athlete on the Australian cycling team. So I kind of have that experience of being coached and also coaching.
Great, thank you. So a real mix of experience here tonight that we can talk to, and it's really exciting to have you all on. I appreciate you joining us. And I think maybe I'll start off and I'll pass this question to you, Naomi, to start. So tactics and teaching styles within sport when we're asked as a coach, and how did you adapt that to teaching people with a disability or athletes with a disability?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's so many different ways that you can go about it. And I think one of the biggest things with coaching is adjusting your style depending on what athletes are in front of you and whether they are athletes living with disabilities or whether they are mainstream athletes. That is a really essential skill for us as coaches. My biggest way that we've altered is we build a lot of routine into what we do in our All-Abilities netball program. So running the same warm-up for our athletes. We have quite a few athletes with multiple who are living with multiple disabilities. So that brings some challenges with it as well. And we have a big spread of physical skills. However, they all really like and really benefit from the routine of training. They know when they turn up that they're going to do the warm-up, and they lead the warm-up, which I think is a really great independence thing for them as well. And then they go into a ball work or a skill session, then we finish with a game. And for some of the athletes, they don't play competition, they only train as well. So it's really important that we have those elements there. In terms of instruction and teaching styles, I think being really clear and explicit is really essential, and trying to avoid those phrases that we all understand but are not necessarily direct. For instance, something as simple as go stand on that cone. Well, we had a player in tears in one of the first sessions we ran because they actually didn't understand how to stand on a cone. So they were really overwhelmed with that information. So we chuckle about it now, and the parent had a good laugh at the time. But it was a really important thing to remember is your instructions need to be succinct, and you need to be really direct with these players. From my experience at the grassroots level, that's really essential. But also make sure that you have a lot of fun. So any kind of game or competition or anything like that you can bring into it to bring the joy into the sport is really important as well. You want to make sure that you use a mixture of demonstrations, verbal instruction, and make sure that you're using someone who can demonstrate what the skill optimally looks like as well, to make sure that that's clear too. So that mixture is really important. And finally, I'd probably just say that our ratio of coaches to players is much higher in our All-Abilities space. So we are very lucky enough to have a lot of volunteers. So we've got about a 1:2 to 1:4 ratio, depending on who turns up on the day. So making sure that there are enough coaches for players so that you can modify that instruction accordingly is really important.
Yeah, definitely great. I know within the Sport4ALL training, we talk a saying we have is say what you mean and mean what you say, and especially that analogy was perfect, where you might say to someone with autism to take a chair, and you're meaning to sit down, but they might actually take the chair and walk away with it, and you have to be very directed with what you say. It's really important. And Chris, I might ask you this next question, and coming from an able-bodied coaching background and then moving into the Paralympic team, what sort of adjustment did you need to make, and how was that transition?
Making the switch to working with the team that I was able to work with, I found that it became a really big collaboration with the athletes. It was, the able-bodied athletes, it was more direction, and this was a project. This is something that we had to develop together to make sure that they got the most out of themselves on snow.
Yeah, definitely. And going to, I guess, South Korea with the Paralympic Games, what were the differences from Sochi at the Olympics to the Paralympics with, I guess, going into let's say the village environment as a coach and looking after the athletes? Was there any more support that you might need to give going on to a training environment at the games or on the hill?
Well, I think with PyeongChang being such a major benchmark event, where a lot of the athletes had never been in that environment. They'd been to World Championships, they'd been to World Cups, but it's not the same. So that extra little bit of guidance to kind of keep them grounded and head in the game, I guess.
Yeah. And I think you demonstrated that it was no different between you talking to an Olympian or talking to a Paralympian. It's that we're athletes, and we the love of sport, and that they're professional athletes, and that was a huge, I think, a part of your culture that you developed in the team.
Yeah, no, definitely. I wanted to be as professional as possible for the para athletes that I got to work with, and to be there in every possible way to help them achieve their goals. And if it means helping them through a media session or just giving them an opportunity to take some downtime to kind of focus on what they've just done for the day and looking after skis or whatever needed to be done. They were the athlete.
Yeah, definitely. And then Kaitlyn, might go to you. So at the community level and in the Jets Gymnastics Club, when you first started, were there any barriers for you joining the club, or you were initially an athlete and then you moved into coaching, and what was that transition like?
I was really lucky that I had a really supportive owner of the gym who completely believed in my ability to coach, and she actually was one of the people who was a really big encourager of we had a couple of athletes with cerebral palsy, which is the same disability as me, and she was a really big encourager of trying to get them into my class. It was an able-bodied class, but I just had a bit more lived experience, I guess, and knowledge of how to really integrate them into the class so they could still be with their peers, they could enjoy it normally, but yeah, I just had heaps of support to be able to be a bit flexible with the program and really make it so it suits each individual.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would have been really important, and probably it helped the success of you developing as a coach and your athletes too, and you having that lived experience supports that cohort of athletes with a disability within your program. I think that's really, really special and really great that you were there to help with that. Naomi, for you, so with the netball team, St Leonard's, and I mentioned this before the webinar, you started off with 2 athletes, I think I read, and you built that program up to about 20 athletes ranging from the age of 12 to 21 years old, and different heights, different abilities, different age groups. Can you talk a bit about that time and how you established that program?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, there's a lot you could say. When we started it, we actually were doing an after-school program. So it was like a Wednesday at 4:30. I can't remember the exact day, but for some reason, not for some reason, we were given some great feedback from a couple of parents that it was just really difficult to get their athletes there at that time. They found that many of them catch school buses home and things like that. So that was a really challenging barrier to overcome. We turned up for 6 months with 3 athletes. So we had 2 for about a month, and then it grew a little bit. But we had 3 athletes for about 6 months. But we were patient, and we knew that as soon as we started getting more numbers, the word would spread. And so we kept persisting, and we moved our trainings to a Sunday. And the Sunday morning worked really well because usually for a lot of our players anyway, they have carers on weekends sometimes. So it was great because the carers were able to bring them, or support workers were able to bring them to training. And what we found is when we moved to the Sunday and we grew to 10 players in a month after that, and then by the end of the following year, we were up to 20. We now have between 25 and 30 in our program. They come and go a little bit at the moment. And we have our players from our other teams come and coach, as well as when we play on a Saturday, we ask for volunteers to fill in any positions from other clubs, and it's creating a really great community feel on the court. And our players are still in their uniform and they're still a team. We don't split them up onto the other team, but at the moment we're getting it only one side to play on a Saturday. The biggest barrier for us was the timing and getting that right. That's really difficult, but we just had to listen to the feedback of the parents and carers. They were the ones that knew best what was going to work for them, and we've been really lucky with the word of mouth that's happened. And many parents have said that they were really concerned about their child being involved in sport. It's something that they never saw their child doing, but after seeing the supportive environment and the ratio of coaches, they felt that they were really safe. They didn't feel like their child was going to get lost in the program or anything like that, which was really great to see. And, we do have a 9-year-old now who's not even, who's very small, probably looks at about the size of a preppy. And we've got a 16-year-old boy who's 6'2" or something. So it does work. They're very, very aware of each other. It's actually really beautiful to watch. They support each other in every way. And I mean, the biggest thing about the whole thing that anyone involved in our program would say is that we're just so proud that we didn't stop when it got hard and when we weren't getting those numbers. And to see where it is now, it's really exciting. It's really exciting. And we just hope that other netball clubs jump on board and we can build a bit more of a network for it in Victoria.
Definitely. I think the point that you made about such a caring and welcoming environment and having that support and that conversation with you've got your coaching staff and then you're utilising the support workers as well and volunteers is so important, and it shows that message of a community where it is a safe environment, and sport's such a great I guess physical motivator, mental health support avenue for everyone. So parents start to see those benefits and want their children to be involved, and we sort of lose those misconceptions about someone with a disability and going into a sporting environment and potentially not being able to do that, but seeing that through the right environment, it's actually something that's really attainable and it's great for everyone to be a part of. And I really like the part where you're saying that we're using the same uniform, we're playing on a Saturday, we're really integrating the program. I think that's really, really important to promote that as we're one club, one team. I think that's a really positive message. Chris, I might ask you, 4 years on from the games and a bit of time to reflect. And as a coach, is there anything you would have done differently when you came in? You come in with not having coached many athletes with disability when you started in 2015. And now after 5 years with the team, what would anything you'd change or anything you learned in that process?
No, I don't think there's many things like the cycle that we were on. I wouldn't change how we went about it. I think we ticked a lot of boxes. The athletes were expected to be their first games coming up in Beijing 2022. And, we had a very balanced, positive program that it gave each of the athletes the ability to be their best and to get the support they needed to actually achieve what they did in South Korea 4 years early. After the games, I think it would be longer camps, more work to be done. I think that, them being in the position that they were in going into PyeongChang and their experience, or just to get experience, and they exceeded in all avenues. I think for this one would be podium potential. And adapting program to be a little bit more high intensity, a little bit more focused on each individual's strengths in their events, where we blanketed the events for the athletes to get as much experience as possible. And I think it would be a little bit more specificity going into the next game. So it's pretty much all I would change.
Yeah, okay. And I guess part of your process as a coach and working with para athletes, I guess you tailored training situations to the athlete specifically and what their disability was, and having that conversation directly with the athlete, I think really supported such a positive environment for training. Would anything you would touch on that and your style there with how you worked with the athletes differently? And was it a challenge with the team having visually impaired athletes, having an athlete with cerebral palsy, having an athlete who was in a sit ski, which is a wheelchair on skis. You know, what were the challenges that you had to manage and overcome there?
Having that mixed ability, you're playing against the variables, which made training and events quite difficult. If it became a flat light day, you know, low cloud cover, just no shadows anywhere. The visually impaired skiers, it was very difficult for them to be out. If they did train or race, they could only do a very short little block. It was a little bit of a sensory overload for them. They were just too fatigued. And then for the athlete that had cerebral palsy, we had to watch the terrain that we were working on. If we had experience at some events where other teams, you know, they're trying to get the advantage and they're setting to hinder certain athletes, so their athletes will excel. And with our athlete that had cerebral palsy, just trying to make sure that they were comfortable enough in that challenging terrain, a little bit off camber, just going against his weaknesses a little bit more to make it a little bit harder for him. The sit ski guys, you know, everyone is running a different line. The visual impaired skiers have a guide in front of them, so you're working with a guide to be the eyes and the coach in the instant on snow. And the sit ski athletes, they are like a missile going down the hill. So you're trying to reel them in to be a little bit more technical and proficient, I guess.
Yeah, great. I think that was definitely be a challenge, managing different abilities and in one team. But once again, coming back to how do we adopt the environment and having that discussion with the athletes really important, and understanding what they can do, not thinking about what they can't do, focusing on what they can do and building from that. Sorry,
Jerry. Like with vision impaired, if it wasn't going to be a positive training environment for them in the race course, we wouldn't just say you're done for the day. We would take them out and they would focus on technical free skiing, working on fundamentals beside the course in a slow environment where there's not a million things going on at once. They can just focus on what they need to do, that they're still making gains even though they're not in the course.
Yeah, definitely. Kaitlyn, another question for you. So as a para athlete, what do you like to see from a coach when, so say you're in the cycling team? What kind of support and what kind of direction do you want as an athlete, and the support as an athlete?
I think the most important thing is being comfortable with the coach and being able to say what's working and what's not, and having the coach be curious and wanting to ask and learn about how to best adapt to different individuals. So I know in the paracycling team, we range from, similar to skiing, blind people on tandems who go super fast, people on hand bikes, people on single bikes, and it's also about, because we've also got amputees and people with cerebral palsy and a whole range of disabilities. It's about balancing what works for each individual, taking into account things like fatigue and just little things that like fine motor skills or how comfortable people are riding in a bunch is a really big thing for me, because I'm not the most steadiest on the bike. So I get a bit nervous around bunch riding, but my coach is really good. He knows that. And if we do have to go for a bunch ride, he'll kind of stay with me and make sure that I feel safe and that everyone else around me feels safe. And I think that's a really important aspect, because the last thing we want is to have a crash on a training ride just before we're about to race.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like the environment that a coach is creating is really important, and having that discussion with you as the athlete to know exactly what you need. And that's a really big piece, isn't it? Not assuming, but being, empathetic and open and asking those questions and really getting to know each other as athlete and coach and having that relationship. And it sounds like, from Naomi and Chris, you're saying the same sort of message, which is it's really good for our clubs that are sort of looking into this new phase and programs and how we can approach that situation. Naomi, a question for you. Coming into the program that you started or that you were running through, did you have any misconceptions around what you first thought, and then potentially it changed after you looking back now?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I know you sent that in the email prior to this, and I've been thinking about it all day. And I guess a misconception that I had is that the athletes themselves limit themselves to some extent. And it's very clear to me that there are no limits for these athletes. And that is definitely a message that we need to keep pushing, that, these athletes are capable of more than what their parents think. We've had parents in tears because they never thought their child would be able to shoot with enough power to score a goal. So, it's the little things that we all take for granted in the mainstream world that I think are the misconceptions. I kind of thought that maybe people would be afraid to be involved in a program. I know that is quite a common thing with people who are not exposed to people living with disabilities, that they do get a little bit sometimes confronted by some of the mannerisms that some people have and the reactions that they have to certain situations. But what has been really pleasing to see is the acceptance within the community at our local netball court, because we're a club, so obviously we play within an association, and the Waverley Netball Association have been incredible. And so that has been really great to see. I also thought it would have been harder to get funding, but there's actually so much funding and so much support out there within the netball space anyway. We've found that actually really easy. We actually find it harder to get funding for our mainstream program. So that's a really great benefit. We've had everything from uniforms fully paid for through to facility hire for free from the association to support the program and keep it low cost, because we know that a lot of people have very expensive lives already as is. So anything we could do to support that and make it accessible to people was really important. So yeah, that's great. And I guess some of those support avenues are looking at like from Disability Sport and Rec Victoria and through grant programs from themselves and the federal government or the state government. Is that sort of the avenues you're going down as an organisation? And just a bit of background in that. Yep. Yeah, sorry, I think you just cut out a second.
Sorry, I was just saying when you look, oh no. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my computer's playing up a bit. I was just saying the types of organisations that you look to support with this was through like Disability Sport and Rec or the state and federal governments or Vic Health. I know I've seen grants and opportunities for clubs to look into those departments.
Yeah, definitely. I think also just even going through Netball Victoria was a really good way to seek their support in terms of that. They and I'm sure other associations would be similar. They actually offered a free kind of starter pack of equipment and things like that for us, because we registered as a Net Set Go program, which is their introductory program. And that offered us free netballs and bean bags and hoops and things like that, which was really valuable. So it's also worth reaching out to them, because they'll also have some ideas in terms of how to write the proposals and things like that, because that can be a little bit overwhelming. But yeah, that was definitely just reach out to the
association
governing body. Yeah.
I was having a conversation actually with Tennis Victoria today. So for our tennis clubs as well, I think that's a really great point that your SSOs, state sporting organisations, do have these resources, and it's just a matter of, I guess, starting that conversation and making that more public knowledge to our clubs, and you know, asking, we're looking at running these programs, what support is out there, or what do we need to do to, what's our avenue, and that's kind of what here at the Sport4ALL program we're trying to support with the helping link those clubs and associations and provide that information with a session like this right now. I'm mindful of time, but we have a little bit more before we'll ask some questions to the members that have joined us. I guess a question maybe for you, Chris, but Naomi and Kaitlyn, if you want to answer this as well, it'd be really good. And the American Olympic and Paralympic committees, so they became one association over the last 12 to 18 months, moving into Tokyo. And I think as combining as one, what do you think that message is? And then for like a grassroots mainstream clubs, what can they learn from that message?
I think them combining it can only mean one thing. It's unification. It's bringing everyone together under the same umbrella. Everyone gets the same opportunities and is supported. Yeah.
Thanks, Naomi or Kaitlyn. Do you have anything you'd like to add on to that, or?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. It's a really positive message to send out to people, and I think that grassroots clubs can also look at that and see that up at the very top level, people are combining Paralympic and Olympic sports, and that it's not like it comes with its challenges, but it's not too difficult that it's impossible. And I think it's just a really good way to see everyone as athletes. We're not athletes and para-athletes, we're all just athletes. And we're training the same way and we're doing the same things. It's just sometimes para-athletes do it a little bit differently. But I think it's also good because able-bodied athletes also are all individuals, the same as para-athletes. And I know in life that no two individuals learn the same way, do the same thing, whether they've got a disability or not. So I think it's really important to recognise that too.
Yeah, and it brings back to that, making sure you have a conversation with the athlete and really dive into how you as a coach and athlete work together. It is that personalised journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
I one last question from me, I guess, is I'll start with you, Naomi. Why is inclusive sport so important to you?
Oh, I could probably answer that question for an hour on my own. But no, I just think to me, I personally, I've played sport throughout my whole life. So I've seen the joy of sport and I've seen the impact it's had on my life. And I just firmly believe everyone should have access to that. The social benefits, the emotional benefits, the recognition of ability, whatever that may be, the celebration of teamwork. And, it could still be an individual sport, but we do know there's always a team element to every sport. And I just think at the community level, I just love giving back. That's why everyone's involved in community sport, and even professional sport too. You love coaching and you love working with athletes. So to me, it's just about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to experience the benefits that I have throughout my life. Great.
Kaitlyn, do you want to add your Your thoughts?
Yeah, so personally for me, when I first started gymnastics as an athlete when I was really, really young, I was put into the squad for people with intellectual disabilities. And for people who aren't aware, cerebral palsy is entirely physical. And it was really frustrating for me because I understood everything that was being said to me and taught to me that I couldn't do most of those things, whereas lots of the other people I was training with didn't understand but could physically do it. And so I was really lucky that I had a coach that recognized that and was like, hey, join the mainstream group where it's a bit more stimulating, I guess. And that was really positive for me. And I just think sport gives so many benefits, both physical health, mental health, social health. It's just amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And Chris, for you, you know, how do you feel about I guess, going to that para team, and how did that impact on you?
It's from when I was an athlete, I had it was always instilled to me, what can I do today to be better tomorrow? And making the transition, working with athletes that I was fortunate enough to work with, the work ethic that they had was amazing, and everyone was pushing each other in a positive way, and everyone was excelling. And at the end of the training block or the training day, we were a big family, and we all hung out together. It was just an amazing experience. It made, it just continued that what can I do today with these athletes that will be better tomorrow? What can we do? And it was just, a very positive environment that the athletes really got on board, and they wanted more. They asked for more, and we just kept going back and forth all the way in that journey.
I think a great point to share is during the Christmas break, when we took all the athletes up to the restaurant at the top of the mountain, and you had to walk 4 or 5 kilometers up this mountain. So we're arranging a skidoo for Sam, who was on a wheelchair, and
Mark,
athletes carrying equipment, and we're supporting each other. I think that there shows that culture and that family.
Yeah, and it became. I would talk to the athletes, when we weren't together as a team at a camp or overseas for a long block. I would talk to the athletes every day and check in. They would call and say how their physical training went, or just something that happened during the day. And it was just really fantastic communication and connection with the group.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for your answers and your I guess your perception and your coaching experience currently. I might ask if anyone on this session has any questions from our clubs and our participants tonight. Otherwise, I do have a few other things I can ask you before we wrap up the session. But I'll just put it out there to our participants tonight. If everyone has a question.
I've probably actually got one for Naomi. You touched on a point around part of your program, part of the positive part of it was having so many coaches and having that really sort of good ratio, coaches to participants, and then that was sort of comforting to parents and family members as well. From a club perspective, how did you go about recruiting those coaches and getting people involved?
Yeah, I think we were really lucky to begin with. We actually had a group of, it was 5 of us who initially began this program. I was the only one who wasn't working with people with disabilities in their workplace. So the others were all teachers' aides or teachers at special schools. So that was a great connection to get the program growing to begin with. And what we did from there is we actually just put it out to our club, including our players, in the mainstream competition, and said, is there anyone that wants to come along and help out? And we did a exhibition match when we finally had enough players. We did an exhibition match before we had the weekly competition up and running on a Saturday. And what that did is they announced it, and they gave them medals and things like that at the end to acknowledge their contribution. But what that did is we gained 4 more coaches who were not actually in our club, who wanted to come across and be a part of the program. And they said, oh, this is amazing. And anytime anyone said this program's amazing, he said, oh, do you want to come on Sunday? And it didn't matter if they were in our club colours or not. It was about building this understanding of inclusion in sport. And inclusion is people with disabilities, but it's also just, let's create a community feel. And we're all here for the same reasons. So that was one of the biggest things we did. We've gone through waves, we've had coaches for 2 years and then they stayed out for a variety of reasons. But we have not struggled at all because we were just so open. Anyone who was willing to help, we welcomed. And there was one point where we had more coaches than players. So making people feel useful was the other challenge of that one.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. Anyone else have a question at all? That's all right. If you do at all ever have any questions, you can always email myself and I can pass it on to our panelists tonight as well. I guess talking about adapting the environment for the athletes. So the Australian Sports Commission and Sport Australia, they developed the tree model. So teaching styles, the rules, environment and equipment. And how do you as coaches utilize that thinking? I think we've talked a lot about, I guess, the way that we approached our sessions and talking to the athlete directly and building it around them. And then equipment is definitely an important part of it too. And you mentioned about rules as well, Naomi. So maybe I'll pose it to you, Naomi. With netball, what sort of rule adaptations have you sort of adopted in your program, or is it not necessary? For example, with tennis, they allow 2 bounces of the ball. Sometimes you can change the size of the field or the time that you're playing. Naomi, maybe I pass this question to you.
Yeah, sure. I think netball is actually quite a complex sport. And if someone has an intellectual disability, it's actually really challenging to understand. I mean, there's 7 different positions on the court. It would be like I know there are other sports out there like that. So we found that we wanted to make sure that we were still being authentic in the delivery of the sport, but allowing for the spread of ability and the needs of our athletes. One of the biggest changes we do is the stepping rule in netball is pretty brutal, to say it one way or the other. So we do allow shuffling as long as they don't gain any more than a metre. We allow the athlete to shuffle their feet. We do still encourage them to keep their feet still, but it's just not possible for some of our athletes to think about that and having to pass the ball to someone who's on their team. So there's just a lot to process. So we do adjust that. We do talk about obstruction. So when they're too close to an athlete, we decide that we actually yell at them, take a step back first. And then if they don't take a step back, then we call it and have that athlete step out of bounds. So we keep all the rules the same. It's really just about easing when you actually enforce the rule and when you choose not to. We initially made a little bit of an error in terms of keeping the ball in play for athletes. So, that athlete's attempting to chase that ball down. And so we just tap it in so it didn't go out of court and they could grab it. But what we found is they then started to rely on us doing that. They didn't quite understand that when the ball goes out, it is the other team's ball. So those rules, we're trying to keep them as authentic as possible, but just be lenient in terms of the actual delivery of them. And that does vary between our training session and our competition game. So our competition game, we are a bit more strict in terms of the rules. And then our Sunday training, where we have a bigger spread, we're much more relaxed with that. as well. And that also, I can speak from the Murray Shield competition. The same thing happens at that competition. There's a discussion between the umpires and the coaches of the states before we take the court, and they talk about how harsh or lenient they're going to be in terms of rules. One of those, the example is New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia are very strong in netball in the Murray Little Shield competition. So when we play each other, they enforce the rules to a mainstream standard. However, when we play other states who are just building their programs and are very, very new, they enforce it for us and they're lenient on the other team. And there is just a shared understanding of that between all the teams, coaches and players. And that's important to make sure that any adjustments are accepted by everyone.
And I guess, as you mentioned, you want to keep that authenticity of the game. You might adopt some rules, but you don't want to lose the ideal of netball, and it changes too much along the way, does it? But it's a good opportunity to, I guess, adopt some things as you're learning the game, I guess, and then bring it back to what the foundation of the rules are. For you, Chris, with winter sports, there's a lot of adaptations to equipment, and what sort of things did you use as a coach, and how did you change certain equipment to suit the environment? So say with the VI athletes, how they use a microphone in their helmet, and then their poles, what their poles can act as a receptor.
Yeah, no. So for the poles for the visually impaired athletes, we got them to treat their ski poles as a bit of a builder's level. That if they could naturally keep their elbows out in front of their chest, their hands out in a natural forward position, if they could feel both their poles dragging on the snow, that would mean or assist them having their upper body align over top of feet. So just giving them a little bit more lateral balance, and just giving them a little bit more support. With the microphones, it became a bit of a work in progress. How you and Sean worked together was a lot different than the other VI athletes, in what cues were being used to activate the athlete for terrain changes, rhythm changes in a race course, specifically slalom, and tailoring it to those individual cues to really get them going.
Yeah, definitely. It was something that Sean and I was on the Paralympic team, for those that don't know, working under Chris, and that was something we had to evolve. And like you said, Naomi, how things evolved as you were tapping the ball in, and then they started to rely on that. So same with Sean and I, as we were working, we had to evolve our communication because things weren't working, and it really needed to be on point and punchy as you're going 100 Ks down the mountain, and there's a lot of variables that change on snow. So it's a part of that coaching process, that timeline. Kaitlyn, for you, do you use a tricycle when you're riding? Is that right? Or are you on a normal two-wheel bike?
I'm on a single two-wheel bike.
You're on a single two-wheel bike?
But I do have, so all my gears and brakes are on my right-hand side. Which is hilarious because my coach is also a para, but he doesn't have any control of his right side, so he sometimes jumps on my back and can't brake. Just small things like that make a massive difference, because it just means I can really control my bike really well, and so when I'm cornering, I've got a lot more confidence to go into it fast and solid, rather than if, say, my brakes were as a conventional bike, I'd only have the front brake, which means you literally just tip your bike and you go head over heels, which isn't ideal.
Right.
So yeah, it's just small things like that that make a really big difference.
So adapting the environment to the athlete and their needs, and I think that's a great example there. Some other ways that for our clubs that you can adapt your environment is thinking about some sensory sort of tactiles, putting some grippy tape on the playing surface, using mats, soft mats in certain areas that players with low vision can utilize, as knowing where their zone is. I don't know if many of you have watched goalball, for example, but the 3 players on a side whilst they're playing the game, and they've got 3 mats positioned on the field, so the player, when they're learning, they know where they are, and then eventually when it gets to the professional level, the mats are gone, but there's tape or lines that have texture on them, so and you'll watch them, they'll always be touching the lines to know where they are. So there are ways we can adapt our training environment as well. So I think I'm mindful of time, and I think we'll wrap it up there, but I just wanted to say a really big thank you to Naomi, Kaitlyn and Chris for joining me tonight and sharing your wisdom and your experience. I think it's incredible, and I think all our clubs will really appreciate what you've shared, and we'll be able to take that back to them. This was the last webinar that we're running in the Sport4ALL program, and I hope that you've really enjoyed these resources, and we will have these available to the clubs to utilize and share with your members. Thank you to the City of Stonington, the Active Communities team, and the support of the Sport4ALL program, and with me and what I'm doing, and to Tyson, Naomi, for your support through your Auslan interpreting. It's great to have showing accessible communication and making sure that we're providing that, and it's part of where we want to create this environment that we're integrating everyone together and making sure that everything we're doing is inclusive, and I think that's really important. So I think we'll finish it there, and thank you so much.
Thanks very much. It's been really informative, and thank you to Jeremy and obviously the City of Stonington to ask us participating clubs and things to get on board. And I know I've certainly, we'll be taking a lot back to our club at Paran Assumption Footy Club. And thank you to all the participants, and especially Kaitlyn and Naomi and Chris tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.
Fantastic.
Alrighty, I'll just stop the recording.